All right, so I've laid out the rules as well as an inference. We have Q is not on F or H. We have R is not on G or H. S and T are never together. T's first will be with Q. R's first will be with S. Now the inference is if T's first will be with Q and Q can't be on F, then T can't be there either because T on F would require Q to go there as well. So that's a small inference you can make. I do think it's useful. It does come up in the game a little bit. You don't necessarily need to make it up front though. You could figure it out over the course of the game. Now, somebody might ask, well, how do I know to draw it this way? There's so many variables, right? You have the 5 people, the 5 talks, you have the 4 people, plus I put an X there to represent whenever a slot is empty. A lot of variables here to juggle. And the way I knew how to do this was honestly just looking at question 14. The diagram from question 14, how LSAC lays it out, gives us insights into how we should do it. So if you're lost dealing with assigning FGHIL with QRST and putting those in order, keep in mind that first off, they're telling us the order of FGHIL, so that's addressed. This game does involve a mix of ordering and grouping, but they've already kind of dismissed the ordering component when they lay it out for us in this order. All we have to remember, of course, is that higher means earlier. So T1 and R1 will occur higher than T2 and R2, the second occurrence of each of those variables. So other than this little inference here, there's not really anything else I would do up front, to be honest. I think that's all you really can do. It's too ambiguous because you have the 8 people, QRST, going twice, so 4 times 2 being 8, and then 10 slots. So it's so open-ended that I wouldn't really think that it's constrained enough to do anything else at the outset. And at this point, I would just jump into the questions. Any questions so far on the setup here? No? All right, well, let's jump in with number 14. So number 14 is a general orientation question where we can simply take one rule or inference at a time and apply it to all 5 choices, checking for violations. It's much faster to do this than to take one choice at a time and apply all the rules to that choice, because then you're cycling through all the rules 5 times. So let's take one rule, simply Q's never on F or H. So anytime we see Q on F or H, we can eliminate the choice. Nothing, right? So they didn't give us anything for that one, but we do have 5 rules and 5 choices, but we're only going to eliminate 4 of the choices, and one will be correct. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I go on to the second rule. R is never with G or H, so just scan G and H for R. We see it in B, right? R is on H in choice B, so B is out. And I think that's all we get for that one. Going on to the third rule, S and T are never together, so just scan horizontally for S and T. By the way, if your eyes are kind of bleeding from these running together, one little thing you could do is just take your pencil or pen and just draw a line separating each of the choices so that you're able to more easily distinguish them from each other. I think it's kind of difficult when they're running together like that. So I just drew horizontal lines to separate them, because it was even giving me trouble here. So S and T never together. Do we ever see them appearing together horizontally? A, yeah, exactly. A has it, so that's out. Then we have T1 is with Q, so T's first occurrence will be next to Q. So look for your first T in the remaining choices and see if you have Q with it. A and B are obviously out now. In C, we have T and Q together on the first appearance of T. D violates that. We have T alone in both cases, which is impossible. And then E's okay on that issue, but we still have one rule left. R1 occurs with S. So R's first will be with S, and that does not happen in E. So E's out, C by elimination. And then C is a valid scenario that we can use going forward to help us throughout the rest of the game, and you will see this actually does come up. later in the game, so don't forget about that one. Number 15, if nobody attends handling people. So if these two slots are filled with my X to represent as a placeholder that that's done. So first step is simply draw X on those. You could do one big X if you want to, but just definitely indicate that that's out. I might redraw the restrictions just so I don't forget about them, because it would be very easy to. I think there's just so many things that we're juggling here. So no one attends H, what must be true? So they are constraining it somewhat, because now every slot has to be filled with either Q, R, S, or T. This slot H was already fairly restricted because neither Q nor R could go there. It would be either S or T or empty with X. But this one can't be Q or T, and the X's are already used, so what's left to go on F? Exactly, R and S must go there because nobody else can. And so that's the only inference that immediately comes from the restriction of the question stem, but it's enough to get us there. A says straight out, R on F, and that's it. Of course, they could have said S on F as well. That would have worked also, but there's not really anything else that logically follows that must be the case. So that was our work for 15, and we're good on that. Now number 16.
But that inference that R and S have to be on F, that's true regardless of that being true, isn't it?
That's what I would think also, except for the fact that there's also the possibility to be empty.
Okay.
So we can't put it on the main diagram, because it could be, you could, if you want, put like both T and Q are out, that leaves R, S, X to potentially go in that row. Next 16, where could R and S go together? Complete and accurate list, any one of which could be valid, essentially. So where could R and S go across all possible scenarios? Well, we know they could go on F, right? We just saw that in 15. So any choice not mentioning feedback for number 16 must automatically be eliminated, getting rid of C. We can also look back at the correct answer from number 14, choice C, which contains the same thing. So that's kind of double supported in that way, but we're still fairly open-ended. But let's see what else. B, so we have remaining here G, I, and L left aside from feedback. But we know from our initial inferences that, initial rule really, that R can't ever go on goal setting, goal sharing. So B is out for that reason. R could never be on G. So now the question is it FIL or FI or FL? As for possibilities for R and S. Thoughts? But we know that R can't go on G or H. So those are out, of course. But there's no reason to think initially that R and S couldn't go on any of F, I, or L. It's totally open-ended. These things are flippable. And obviously R's first will go with S. But for all we know, maybe R's second goes with S also. That does appear to be a possibility. So I would probably, at this point, I would just pick A and move on. I wouldn't bother to draw it out and test it all. You can if you want to, but I don't think it's worth doing. Or if you did want to, I would actually come back, wait till the end, draw your diagrams for 17 and 18, and see if they help you coming back for number 16. So I'm going to leave off with that one for now, and we can come back to it later if you want. Next, 17. So just because I'm choosing 16A for 16. 17. If Q's the only employee to attend leadership. So Q's on leadership and nobody else is, then what could be false? Could be false is always kind of confusing wording. You could, if you want to, treat it as must be true, except 4 of them have to be the case. 1 is not necessarily the case. Regardless, I would just take this limitation and draw all the inferences I can from it before moving on to the choices. So any inferences we can make here, Q's on L, so one of our Q's is assigned. We also know that Q cannot go on either F or H. And we know that R cannot go on G or H.
Got the Q with T1.
Q with T1, yeah. Good, where?
So if you put Q at I,
Mm-hmm.
that means it would go with its first T, right?
Right. So,
Where's the second one go?
well, the thing is now we're already,
Well, they can't go there because
Because
it's
it's
T1.
exactly. So this is the first, this is the,
Yeah.
T, so T1 has to do with Q. If we put T, we have to put the first T earlier, because that's going to be the second one, of course.
So we also know Q doesn't go in I then.
Exactly.
So it has to go in G.
Exactly. So that's great. I think an easier way to determine that might be to start off with R, because R can't go on G or H. The only possible places for R will be F and H. Will be F and I, because that L is filled, and these two slots are, these G and H are already restricted from R, so R is left to be only on F and I.
Yeah, and then you know S has to be I.
Exactly, so S, R's first goes with S, and then later, of course, we can infer this. So we've got our two R's, we need one more T, we need one more S, and we need one more empty.
T has to be split, so just
Correct, so we could do a dual split option, then you see, of course, that X ends up there.
And no one would think R is easier, it's just because you practice a lot of these.
Well, R seems easier to me because L, of course, was filled, right? So you're definitely not having R there. We know from the initial rules that R can't be on G and H. So 3 out of the 5 rows are prevented from having R there. So all that leaves is F and I. I personally think that's an easier road to go down, to place your R's, and then you place your R1 with your S. You could go the other way if you want to. Some things are personal. But I think it requires extra steps to get to QT being there specifically. Now, this is a could be false question. So while you could fill these in, I don't think you necessarily need to. You might have needed to if a choice referred to this being empty, because that's a must, of course. But your coulds are really going to be about one of these three. And since X is not listed on the choices, there's no empty there, it's going to be about S or T. We know that S, first of all, there's only one choice on T, saying T's on G. That's a must, of course, so that's out. So D's eliminated, so yeah, D's eliminated there. Then your choices with S. S on F is, of course, required, but S on, sorry, I eliminated the wrong one there. S on F is required, but S on H is a possibility, but not required. You could have T on H and S on I, so that could be false. So we're left with D, of course, being correct there. Questions on that? Otherwise? Okay. Then 18, if R is the only employee attending information overload, of course, we haven't seen that previously, so draw a new diagram. Then what could be false? Again, we take our inferences and we run with this. We've got all our restrictions, which I think are useful just to remember where variables like R cannot go. So R can't go on G or H. It's left to be on either F or L. Which one's it going to be on?
F.
Yeah, good. Why?
Because it's first.
Yeah, R's
Since
first.
it has to go with an S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, R's first
So
with
the I
S.
can't be its first instance.
Good. So R and S go there. Anything else we can infer right now?
Q's, yeah.
Did the Q's, right?
Yeah.
So Q can't go on H. All that's left is G and L. So Q on G, Q on L. T's first is with Q. And T's first obviously won't be the last slot because T has to go twice. So T's going to go up here. Then once again, we're left with S, T, and X to go on any of these three slots. And once again, T and S have to be split. So X will go here and TS, S, T. You could again leave those three empty if you wanted to. I don't think you necessarily have to fill them in. But then once again, could be false. In other words, must be true except. So QL is a must. So A is out. RF is a must. SF is a must. TG is a must. So E by elimination, and of course looking at E, T on H could happen, but they're interchangeable, not a must. And you could of course start off this one by looking specifically for choices referring to S and T specifically, because they're the only ones that really have the ability to be somewhere else. They're the only ones there's a could about and not a must about. So that's the game. Any questions on this game? I know there's a lot to it. There's a lot of pieces. It is a hard one. I actually had multiple people request I do this one today. And I think it does come back to boiling it down. You take all those variables and you group them. And luckily enough, LSAC gives you the grouping in question 14. So if you're ever at a loss for how to diagram, again, go to the orientation question. It'll set you on the right path.
So I thought they had to do that because it says that they're successive in the stimulus. And then you also mentioned 14, but does saying successive also mean that they have to be in that order?
Yeah, so successive means order. Successive is one of those less common ordering words.
Right, I'm saying, so I got that it has to be like that, not because of 14, but because it says successive in the stimulus.
That's great. Yeah, I
Is
think
that also an okay way to read that? Or like if I see that in another question, is it correct that I would say it goes like that?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, the only difference to me is that what 14 does that the word successive alone doesn't do is 14 gives you an actual picture. Like for successive, we might think horizontal. And I think horizontal is a lot tougher for this one than vertical is.
Okay.
Because then you can easily make these nice boxes that are limited within F or limited within G. If you do it all horizontally, if you did something like, and you have to kind of do this, I think that's a lot harder. And it might take up more space too, depending on your style. These things are always arbitrary in the end, but I don't think it's, I think you don't need to give yourself more work than you need to. You know, I think the question tells you. There's no reason not to look at it. It's not, the question, how it's laid out is not likely to steer you wrong.
Okay, so it's always reliable to look at something like 14 then for your graph.
To at least give you an idea. You might not always want to draw it exactly the way they do it, but I don't think they're not purposely trying to give you a bad way to do it. They're telling you how they think about it. If you ever look at LSAC's Super Prep book, they give you more detailed walkthroughs of games in their style. Their style's not always the best style or most efficient, but I do think it's useful to see how they think about things. And the orientation question is doing the same thing for you.
What's it called?
LSAC Super Prep. It's published by LSAC. There are actually two versions of it now. There's the initial Super Prep book that contains exams A, B, and C, of course, which are not numbered, weirdly enough. They're from exams February 96, February 99, and February 2000. And the cool thing about it is two things that are cool about it. One of them is that the games are really, really hard for some weird reason. They're just hard games. But also they contain full LSAC written explanations for every single question in those exams, plus a general overview of the LSAT and how they think about it. It's like $20 on Amazon, and you can't really get those exams anywhere else. They're only published in that book. Aside from that, there's a new Super Prep book called Super Prep 2, containing exams 62, 63, and another recent exam from the past, like 5 years or so. And that also contains LSAC written explanations and a general overview. Of course, you already have 2 of those exams in this book, so it's kind of a waste. I wish they hadn't done it that way, but that's the only way to get it. I'd suggest instead maybe getting the first book, unless you really want the explanations.
And you just said that the older exams have easier reasoning questions?
I think overall, the exam's gotten harder over time. So anything like really prior to the 50s is going to be a bit easier on average. I think I noticed a big shift starting in the 50s where everything got tougher overall. So you want to focus your prep, unless you're studying for the exam like a year from now, I'd focus on the 50s and up. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.